The next level, what insiders know about executive success. You know, one of the toughest transitions in anyone's career as they move up the leadership chain is that move from one level to the next. When you take that significant step forward in your career, it might be from senior director to vice president or vice president to senior vice president. And I know it's a tough transition because I've lived through it. I used to be a vice president in a commercial bank. What's different when you move to a larger company is there are fewer people in those leadership roles, and that's what happened to me. I moved from the bank that I was in to a Fortune 500 company, one of the larger subsidiaries of that company, as a member of the senior leadership team at the vice president level. To make a long story short, it took me about 2 weeks to realize that I was in so far over my head with that step up to the next level that I was just sinking fast. The good news for me was that I had a boss, the CEO of the company, who recognized that very early. And she pulled me aside and mentored me and coached me and said, hey, I need you to stay sane. I brought you here for a reason, and that was for your perspective and some leadership. I didn't bring you here to stick your finger in every hole in the dike and run around and be down there in the weeds and try to do everything yourself. Pull up and lift up and work at that next level. That was really fortunate for me. What I've learned in 6.5 years of coaching executives is that most executives and most leaders aren't fortunate to have that kind of boss. They are left to sink or swim on their own. The expectations of them in their leadership roles are very high, but very rarely are they clearly defined. And that's really become a passion of mine as a coach, is to define for my clients what's expected of you at the next level. I'm so passionate about it that about a year ago I did a research project where I interviewed around 30 very successful executives, and I asked them 2 questions. If you were mentoring or coaching someone who was coming up to the executive level for the first time in their career, what would you encourage them to pick up, and what would you encourage them to let go of from a behavior and a mindset standpoint? And in those interviews, I was fortunate enough to tape them, and then I had them transcribed, and I ended up with about 1,000 pages, literally, of interview transcripts. And I went through them to see what I was hearing in the research. I approached it honestly as a big, huge feedback project, similar to one I might do for an individual client, but instead of interviewing 10 or 12 colleagues, I interviewed 30 colleagues, and it was a client that I really didn't know, but I sure knew about the situation because it's somebody moving to the next level. And so what I heard in that feedback was a theory and a model, really, a practical model around executive presence. You know, executive presence is one of those terms that we use so often in business and in organizations. That person has executive presence, or that person needs more executive presence. What bugs me about it is we use the term, but we don't define it very often. We don't really say what we mean by that. What are we seeing if we're seeing executive presence? So what I heard in the research were 3 categories of executive presence that show up in leaders who are successful in making that move from one level to the next. The first category is personal presence, which is all about how you view yourself and how others view you. It's about how you show up in conversations and in meetings and in larger settings in your organization. It's that sense of confidence that you project as a leader. The second category that I heard in my research was team presence. It's all about how you lead and leverage your functional team. As executives, almost all of us, maybe with the exception of the CEO level, have functional responsibilities in addition to our executive responsibilities. We might be the CFO, responsible for the finance function, or the senior VP of marketing, or the senior VP of sales. All of us need to leverage our functional teams when we have roles like that. And it's only that, doing that successfully, that enables us to move to the last category of executive presence, which is organizational presence. All about how we lead laterally across the organization and not just vertically within our function. Because the expectation and really the obligation of senior leaders, executive leaders at any level, senior director and above, is to show up as a leader for the entire organization and not just the leader of that function. I want to talk more about that in quick talks to come, personal, team, and organizational presence, and give you some key distinctions around what to pick up and what to let go of in that model and that application of executive presence.